Howdy my totally as always tubular gamers. We're back with another video. Let's jump to it.
Well, I think it's finally time to talk about the Wolfenstein series of games. Now, if you're not familiar with Wolfenstein, it is the single longest running series of first-person shooters, and it really is the granddaddy of the FPS genre. While it originally didn't start out as a first-person shooter, since those didn't really exist, the original Castle Wolfenstein and Beyond Castle Wolfenstein, they came out in the early 80s, still had the idea of Wolfenstein. They were still alternative history World War II games that see William B.J. Blazkowicz, an American army captain, going up against the Nazis. And while those original two games were cool and all and actually quite revolutionary for the time, we're not going to be looking at those today. We're going to be looking at the first-person shooter series of Wolfenstein, starting with Wolfenstein 3D. Developed by id Software, this really was the game to put first-person shooters on the map, and every FPS game since can trace its heritage back to Wolfenstein 3D, but this really was just the start to the Wolfenstein series. Now, even though id left Wolfenstein for Doom and Quake, that didn't spell doom for Wolfenstein. Throughout the years, Wolfenstein has come back a number of times with 3 separate reboots over the years and several other titles, but they're all really about the same thing. They're all about Blazkowicz going up against the Nazis and killing as many as possible. And now that you've had your mini history lesson, let's talk about what this video is all about. We're going to be ranking the Wolfenstein games from worst to best, stacking them up against each other, comparing and contrasting, giving each one of them a little review, sharing my thoughts, feelings, memories, etc., seeing which ones you should play and which ones you should skip. As always, I'm not including any mobile or VR titles. I just don't have any experience with these, so I can't comment on them. I'm not going to be talking about those 2 original games, since we're going to be just sticking to the FPS games. I love the Wolfenstein franchise. I've been a fan of it for a very long time. I got these games with the Doom and Quake titles, and have a lot of fond memories with these games, so it'll be fun to revisit them. Now, I actually ranked the Wolfenstein series many years ago, but that was before my rankings had little reviews for each of these games, and I'm just not really happy with that ranking video anymore. So we got a new one coming, and I'm going to actually include Wolfenstein Enemy Territory this time. And so with that, let's get to the ranking. I am totally tubular Jonathan. It'd be real tubular of you to like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon, the super thanks, and memberships. Any support is truly, and I mean truly, greatly appreciated. If you made it to this part of the video, you can comment tube. Yep, the code word's in the beginning because I'm just so happy you watched even 2 minutes of this video. Anyway, what is the worst of the Wolfenstein series? What's at the very bottom? And so here we have Wolfenstein 3D Spear of Destiny, which released in 1992. While I very much could have included this game with the original Wolfenstein 3D, but it actually was originally released as a standalone product, and I don't want to include it with Wolfenstein 3D because this game sucks. It does not matter how many times I've come back to Spear of Destiny, I have always hated this game. It really is the worst aspects of Wolfenstein 3D cranked up to 11. Now, I've got my issues with the original game and it not aging all that well in a few areas, but this game just takes it to a whole nother level. So the game is a prequel to the original Wolfenstein 3D, and it's about BJ trying to recapture the Spear of Destiny from the Nazis after they stole it. And you know, Nazis stealing ancient artifacts and the American having to go take them back sounds pretty familiar to another franchise, but it's always gonna be cool. Unfortunately, the gameplay is really where this game just shits the bed. When it comes to the moment-to-moment gameplay, it's virtually identical to Wolf 3D. You're walking through these narrow hallways, shooting at basically everything that has a pulse. Along the way, you're getting keycards to unlock doors and finding secrets. It sounds shrimple enough, and it absolutely is shrimple enough. But the game really just falls on its ass thanks to 2 large issues: the enemy placement and the level design. Now, the enemy placement in the original game, it left a lot to be desired, but in Spear of Destiny, it is just downright horrible. You will constantly be ambushed and jumped by enemies left and right. You will turn around the corner and there will be a bunch of them to shoot at you, and you'll have virtually no time to react. The only way you could defeat them and not take a decent amount of damage is knowing that they're there to begin with, leading to a lot of bullshit trial and error, and you die pretty fast in this game. You can't take a lot of hits, so you'll end up moving around super slowly, and this isn't fun. You'll go into a new room and you'll just get absolutely mauled. It's like you're a piece of bread at Santa Monica Pier and all the enemies are seagulls flying around, and they come at you all at once from all different directions. And so you end up just trying to funnel them into a few choke points, but instead you just end up getting choked yourself. And this really just cripples the combat. It makes it so unenjoyable. It is not fun slowly walking around these areas, checking every corner, etc. extensively, opening the door and backing up immediately, and hoping you can get the drop on these hit scanning enemies. It's just not enjoyable whatsoever. This is an old school first person shooter. I'm not supposed to be moving and playing like it's one of the older Rainbow Six games. That's not Wolfenstein. It brings the pacing and the speed down to a screeching crawl, and it just ruins the flow of this game. But you know what doesn't help matters? The wretched level design. The level design is labyrinthian in this game. It is unbelievably confusing, convoluted, and just all over the place. I really don't know what they were going for here. There's maze-like, and then there's whatever the fuck this is. Like, when you're getting this lost in the first few levels, you know it's not going to be a good sign, and it only gets worse the further you get in this game. I was lost pretty much every single level. I mean, all of the rooms look virtually the same with little to no landmarks, and some of these levels are massive, and then you have to get keys to unlock doors. Sometimes there's secret walls that need to be found and pressed in order to just proceed through the level normally, not even for a secret. Forget finding any secrets. The secret is finding the exit. This is just poorly designed, and it leads to this game being just the most frustrating experience. I've never had anything close to a good time with this game, and even if you're a die-hard Wolfenstein fan, you love Wolfenstein 3D, you still shouldn't play this game. I don't recommend this game to anybody. It sucked then, and it really sucks now. And here we have Wolfenstein Young Blood releasing in 2019. Outside of the VR title, this is actually the latest Wolfenstein title, and it actually wasn't just primarily developed by Machine Games like the other modern Wolfenstein titles. It was also co-developed by Arcane Leon. And if that name sounds familiar, it should. They made Dishonored. So this game takes a very different approach from all of the other Wolfenstein games in several different areas. For starters, you don't actually play as BJ in this game. I believe this is like the only Wolfenstein game where you don't play as BJ. No, you actually play as his two daughters. See, the game takes place nearly 20 years after Wolfenstein 2, where the Nazis have been pushed back considerably, but Europe is still under Nazi control. It's in the 80s now, and BJ's two daughters are not only fully grown, but they very much know how to defend themselves. Well, one day BJ just disappears for some reason, and after some investigating, the girls find out that he's actually gone to Paris to go help out the French resistance, but he hasn't gotten back to them in a while. They get worried, so they're going after their daddy. Now, when it comes to the story of this game, I've always been a bit mixed on it. Like, I don't hate it. I think it's got plenty of good ideas. I think it's really interesting, and I quite like the idea of William's daughters growing up, kicking ass, and killing Nazis while he gets old and retires. But this game, there's just something about the tone, the attitude, and the writing that doesn't do it for me. I just don't love the daughters. I don't find them to be all that engaging, likable, and oftentimes I just kind of find them more annoying than anything else. Like, yeah, they are still teenagers and they're all amped up that they're finally killing Nazis and stuff, but this more lighthearted, dare I say, Marvel movie-esque approach really doesn't fit Wolfenstein, and I just don't really think it fits this game either. I had a pretty hard time getting invested in the story outside of the very end, and it certainly has its moments and there was a lot of potential, but I think it's all unrealized for the most part. At best, the story is middling, and at worst, it's just annoying, and I feel rather indifferent to the whole thing. Either way, it was a bit of a disappointment. When it comes to the gameplay, it is an extension on Wolfenstein 2's gameplay, where it's a bit of a mix between an old and new school first-person shooter. And when it comes to the guns, the gunplay, and weapons in general, I think they feel great. They're all hefty, they're all nice to use, they've got some great sounds behind them, and it feels like they've actually got some real weight to them. However, that's really the nicest thing I can say about the combat in this game. See, this game is very different from all the other Wolfenstein games in that it adds some light RPG elements to the overall gameplay. Think Borderlands, but not even as involved as that. The game feels like it wants to be a looter shooter, but it doesn't fully commit to the idea, and so enemies are rocking health bars now, and they actually have levels as well. As you defeat enemies and complete missions, you will gain experience, you'll level up, there's even skill points here, which was kinda in prior modern Wolfenstein games, but not like this. But what I'm trying to say is, if you're not near the enemy's level, they just end up being a total bullet sponge and you'll pump them full of way too much lead before you're able to kill them. Some enemies just have way too much health in this game in general. You'll unload so much ammo on them before you're finally able to take them out, and it actually starts to feel pretty grindy. There was always tough enemies in the modern Wolf games. There was always enemies that would take a bit of abuse, but not like this. Some enemies just take way too much, and I think it really affects the overall pacing of the combat and just makes it less enjoyable than most Wolfenstein games. Sure, there's a decent amount of weapons, you have the power suits, and stealth even returns here, but I just didn't find it as much fun as I did in the previous ones, thanks to these shoehorned mechanics, but unfortunately it goes deeper than that. It also affects the structure and pacing of this entire game. So in the other modern Wolf games, they were very linear shooters. You went from point A to B and you'd never go back to that area again, shrimple as that. Here though, you're dropped into this like pseudo open world, like open area, and you take on missions in it. And unfortunately, these missions and the level design in general is just nowhere near as tightly crafted as the other games. Rather than constructing linear levels with exciting set pieces, you're forced into these more boring open areas that you have to go back and forth between numerous times. And there are legit some areas to this game that you'll go through like 4 or 5 times, and it does start to get old. I also think the level design just isn't that strong. It feels like it wants to be Dishonored, but it's more like Dishonored Light, where it doesn't fully commit to being an immersive sim. Instead, it's just kind of open and feels underdeveloped, and like there's not enough to do in these open areas either. Like, yeah, you can be stealthy and the stealth is fine in this game, but it all just feels like a step back from the prior games. There are times where the gameplay absolutely shines through, where you can have a good time with it and even a bit of fun, but these moments are fleeting, and when they show up, it just kind of reminds you of how much better the other Wolfenstein games are. I don't think Wolfenstein needs these RPG elements. I think they actually detract more than they add, and it just feels like the game wasn't ready to commit to being an RPG or a looter shooter or a live service or even a regular first-person shooter, and so what we have here is just kind of a mess. It all just feels kind of thrown together, and then you can play through the entire game in co-op, and co-op in this game, it's fine. There's some cool elements there, but if you don't have somebody to play with you, you're stuck with the AI, and it's unfortunately not very good. The game's around the same length as the other newer Wolfenstein games, but it sure does feel a lot longer. Thanks to all of the recycling and just how grindy it gets towards the end of the game, the pacing just isn't strong with this one. While the presentation might be nice, and there are some bright spots to this one, I just can't really recommend it. Unless you're a die-hard Wolfenstein fan, you're better off just skipping this one. There's much better entries in the franchise, and while I can appreciate that they tried to do something a little different with this one, it just didn't really pan out. It's not awful, but I don't think it's worth your time. And so here we have Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, developed by Splash Damage and released for the PC in 2003. This is a different type of Wolfenstein experience. It is strictly a multiplayer experience, and a decent little one at that. So the first thing you're probably wondering about this game is, it's over 20 years old. Does it even go online anymore? And if it does, is there anybody playing it? Well, the answer is yes. The game was re-released for free on Steam, and there's actually people still playing it to this day. It's had a small but mighty little community, and you can still find games for it, and there's some fun to be had here. It mostly utilizes gameplay mechanics and assets from Return to Castle Wolfenstein, but what you have here is a decent little shooter. I'd say the most comparable is Battlefield or even Day of Defeat, where if you're on the offense, you usually have to complete some rather basic objectives, and if you're on the defense, well, you're just trying to stop them. While there wasn't a ton of official maps released for this game, there are hundreds, if not dozens, of community maps, and what's really cool is some game modes actually carry over to another map. Yeah, the match continues in this campaign style mode that would eventually become really popular in like the Red Orchestra Rising Storm series, but yeah, it's here, and I think all of these game modes are cool. I think the weapons feel nice, and it still is very playable nowadays. I don't have a ton of time in this, and maybe one day I can put some more time into it. Either way, I'm just glad to see that it's not totally dead, and you can actually still have, you know, a good time with this one. You get experience points, there are some unlockables, and it's genuinely all completely free. I had more fun with this one than Spear of Destiny, Youngblood, Quake Champions. Shoot, I even think this game's kind of better than Enemy Territory Quake Wars. Either way, you got a fun little multiplayer game here. Nothing that'll blow you away, but maybe a few hours of enjoyment. And so here we have the FPS to kick off all FPS games, Wolfenstein 3D, releasing originally in 1992. Now, Wolfenstein 3D really was a game changer. FPS games would never be the same again. Now, obviously, Doom would really push things forward, but Wolf 3D cannot be forgotten about. And so you might be wondering, if it's such an important, influential title, why is it so low on the list? Despite being a legendary landmark game, coming back to it in the modern day, you can see how much it's aged, how much technology and gaming in general has moved forward. It's just dated in so many aspects that it makes the game less enjoyable. And really, it's through no fault of the game. They didn't have a blueprint when they were making this. They had made Catacomb 3D and Hover Tank, but that was it. They were pretty much going in blind here. And for that, I think they did a great job. But if you come back to this game in the current year, yeah, you might be struggling with it a little bit, especially if you didn't play it back in the day. But anyway, when it comes to the story, it's nice and simple. It sees you playing as this man known as BJ, and it's up to him to stop the Nazis. And yeah, that's all there is to it. When it comes to the gameplay, it's pretty basic. You move in first person, forward, backwards, to the left, to the right, and you're just kind of moving forward, going through doors and gunning Nazis down. If it can move, you're going to be shooting at it. Along the way, you're going to have to pick up these keys that can open locked doors in order to progress, and of course more Nazis will show up to try to gun you down. When it comes to the enemy roster, it is and I mean very basic. There's dogs, there's Nazis, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And when it comes to what weapons you get in this game, it's pretty iconic. You have a knife, a pistol, a submachine gun, and then a chain gun. All of which, outside of the knife, do a great job at gunning down Nazis. They even have a nice little kill animation and throw out some iconic lines. When it comes to how Wolfenstein 3D looks, obviously it looks very rudimentary nowadays, but when this came out, it was considered to be kind of mind-blowing. I mean, it's in 3D, wow! But hey, I can appreciate how this game looks. It's obviously very iconic when it comes to its graphics, and I think there's some good sprites in here. I think it's actually aged just dandy when it comes to the presentation, even if there's no ground or ceiling texture. But this game has aged in a few key aspects that really hold it back for me. First off, the enemy placement is just straight bullshit. This is not an easy game. You actually die quite fast in it, and you'll frequently turn around corners and just get gunned down immediately. Or you'll open a door and immediately get shot at before the door's even finished opening, and it's like, how on earth were we supposed to know that there would be an enemy there? They just straight get the drop on you, and this happens all the time. And so it leads to you playing very carefully. You'll be peeking around every corner. The moment you open a door, you'll check all the corners of the room, and you'll be taking things rather slowly. And this really isn't the most fun. It's clear this isn't the intended way to play the game, but with so many enemies waiting to constantly ambush you, you have to take things a bit slow here. You'll also likely find yourself just trying to funnel the enemies into one spot so you can take them out a lot easier. Again, this isn't the most fun way to play the game, but you can't even circle strafe, so it's like you kind of got to play this cat and mouse game, and I never liked this. Something else that I've never been huge on is the level design. While plenty of the levels are basic enough, as you get through the game, it starts to get way too complex, and it just becomes so wildly confusing that I'll feel lost after just a few rooms. It certainly doesn't help things that almost all of the rooms look virtually identical, and it really doesn't help things when certain walls can actually be moved and are secret doors, and there's a few times where that's actually necessary to progress. Yep, I broke out the walkthrough. I was like, where do I go? What do I do? Complete with, how was I supposed to know that moment? And the last complaint that I want to bring up is, even though this game is only a few hours long, it feels a lot longer than just a few hours. It really starts to feel like a chore, and it was to the point where I was having trouble finishing the game. At the very least, the game has some really iconic sounds, beeps, boops, and music, so that'll certainly help things. Look, you can't take away from Wolfenstein 3D's legacy. Its legacy is vital to gaming in general. It's just the game itself nowadays, yeah, I got some issues with it. Yeah, these are more retrospective issues, but we also live in 2025, so I'm going to look at it in 2025 as well. If that bothers some people, well, I'm sorry, but this is also just my opinion, and I'm always going to share how I'm feeling about the game. Despite all this, I still think it's worth checking the game out at some point. I mean, it was important to gaming for a reason. I'm not saying you gotta play all the way through it, but just giving it a shot and seeing how far we've come is something that I can recommend. And so here we have Wolfenstein releasing in 2009. This was developed by Raven Software. Yes, Quake 4, Heretic Hexen, and eventually Call of Duty Raven Software, and was the second reboot for the franchise. I believe it's loosely connected to Return to Castle Wolfenstein, but not really. The game's story is about BJ fighting Nazis during World War II. Yeah, I know, this is crazy shit. Water is wet, the sun is gonna go down tomorrow, and I'm gonna consume some spicy nuggets in the future. All really startling out-of-pocket claims here, but the Nazis this time around have a lot of supernatural shit. They lean more into the supernatural stuff in this Wolfenstein game than maybe any other game in the entire franchise. They go all out with this shit, and you know what? I actually think the story and setting is pretty cool in this game. It also just has a really unique atmosphere to it that none of the other Wolf games have. It has that grimy late 2000s vibe to it that isn't really seen much these days. You know what I'm talking about if you played an FPS in the late 2000s. This game has that aesthetic and it meshes well with Wolfenstein, even if at times it does come off a little generic. I think the story setting, all that, is fine enough. When it comes to the core gameplay, it actually plays most like a shooter from the late 2000s. And what do I mean by that? I mean that it plays quite similarly to COD in many aspects. The feel, the shooting, the regenerating health, and the movement all feels reminiscent of late 2000s Call of Duty. But there are still a few elements of it being an old school shooter. For instance, you can still carry all of your weapons all at once. Thank goodness, I don't want to just carry 2 at a time. And that's because a lot of the weapons actually feel pretty nice in this game. You don't have like this massive arsenal, but all of the weapons feel different, and I'd say the combat is pretty decent in this game. Hell, the enemy AI isn't even all that bad here either. Sometimes they'll flank you and do maneuvers you'd never expect. Other times though, they are dumb as rocks. What I'm trying to say here is that the shooting in the first person shooter is well done, so that's a good thing. We've at least got a W there. Now, what's probably the biggest gimmick for Wolfenstein 2009 is the veil. At any point you can switch between the normal world and this supernatural world where all of your senses are heightened, and it will tell you where all of the enemies are. It'll even tell you where all of the secrets are. It's essentially Arkham Vision from the Batman Arkham games. There's no good reason why you wouldn't want to be in this mode at all times other than the game looking kinda ugly when you're in the other world. You can't infinitely be in the veil, but it's so easy to recharge it that you end up spending a lot of time in it. You also get a bunch of powers like this little shield or the ability to stop time, and eventually you'll just be wrecking Nazis left and right. Not only do you get a bunch of OP-ass weapons, but you're just annihilating them with all of these superpowers, and it can actually get pretty fun. This is really when the game is at its highest point. This game's structure and pacing is pretty interesting. It's different from most Wolfenstein games. It actually has a hub area that you get to explore in between missions, and this is not some tiny little area either. It's actually decently big, and there's even some collectibles and side objectives in here, but honestly, I just didn't really care for this hub world. I just kind of wanted to go from mission to mission. I didn't have a lot of fun exploring around it or getting through it. I would have rather they got rid of the hub world and added another level or two. Maybe that's a hot take, but I just didn't really enjoy this all that much, and it really does affect the pacing. I didn't want to keep coming back to this open area. I just wanted to go to the next mission. I think Wolfenstein is at its best when it's just linear mission after linear mission, big bombastic set piece to the next. But this isn't a deal breaker, and I'm sure there are plenty of people that do like the open area in this game. I'm just good off it. Now, I think Wolf 2009 plays pretty well. It looks decent enough even if it does very much look like a 2000s game, and it does have some nice elements to it, but unfortunately, I always find this game to be just a bit forgettable and generic. It's just a very by-the-numbers first-person shooter from the late 2000s that happens to have the Wolfenstein brand all over it. Like, yeah, there's a bit of a supernatural twist, and there's a few things here and there that you wouldn't find in every shooter from the late 2000s, but it just kind of blends in with them all, and it has a hard time standing out, especially if you're comparing it to all of the other Wolfenstein games. It just didn't really leave that much of an impact, and unfortunately it's just kind of been forgotten at this point. It did have multiplayer, but by the time I got around to this game, there was nobody playing it. Unfortunately, there's no modern way to play the game either. It is not available on Steam, and it's never been re-released, so you're either going to have to get a disc, dust off one of the old consoles, or go sail the high seas to play this one. And while I can give it a thumbs up and recommend it, it's not the strongest recommendation. There's plenty of other Wolfenstein games I would recommend over this one, but if you've tried them all and you're looking for something different, or you're looking for a solid shooter from the late 2000s, go ahead, check this one out. But you could do a bit better. And so here we have Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus, developed by Machine Games and released in 2017. I remember eagerly awaiting this one. I actually played it at E3 that year, and remember just being even more excited for the game by the time I was done with the demo. But here we are all these years later, and while I think Wolfenstein 2 is a good game, I feel like it does fall short in a few areas. I also know that this game has gotten to become pretty divisive amongst the Wolfenstein community, and I can understand why. See, when it comes to the story, it takes place after the New Order, and it's all about BJ and his crew trying to take America back from the Nazis. and the premise sounds shrimple enough, but this game has a whole lot of story to it, way more than any other Wolfenstein game. They introduce all of these characters, there's a lot of dialogue, and there's just a surprising amount of cutscenes. I say surprising because the story isn't all that deep or complex or nuanced. Like, things absolutely happen. Shit hits the fan in this game, and there are some wild moments in the story, but I'm not gonna act like this game's writing or storytelling is phenomenal. The writing is pretty hit and miss, and the game's tone is just kind of all over the place. Sometimes it's serious, sometimes it's dead fucking serious, and other times it wants you to LMAO or LOL out here. And don't get it twisted, all of the Wolfenstein games had a bit of a sense of humor. They all had little winks and nudges, and the occasional laugh, but they didn't beat you over the head with the comedy. They weren't shoving it in your face like this game does. For the most part, they were pretty serious with just some funny little things here and there. This game, yeah, it just kind of feels like it's all over the place, and a few of these characters go through arcs as well, and I'm just like, I don't think this is why I came to a Wolfenstein game. And I'm not saying that this series can't have deep narratives, it's just this game's story, characters, writing, dialogue, tone in particular is pretty middling, and I don't think it really warrants all of these cutscenes. I know plenty of people who have played through this game and just skipped every cutscene because they were sick of the story, and while I didn't do that, I certainly wasn't loving a lot of the cutscenes, and I don't really care for the gameplay to cutscene ratio. I think it's a bit skewed, especially for a Wolfenstein game. But let's actually talk about what a Wolfenstein game is first and foremost. A first-person shooter. This game is a follow-up to the New Order when it comes to the gameplay, and it's just as good as the New Order, if not better. It really feels like, when it comes to the gunplay and the combat, it feels excellent. All of these guns feel phenomenal. They're just all so powerful, they have some serious heft and weight, they all leave a good impact, they sound really nice, enemies react accordingly. It really is some of the best combat that the series has ever seen. There's different ammo types, and you'll just mess shit up. You can dual wield most of the weapons and just feel kind of unstoppable, and then there's some two-handed weapons that are also really powerful. The game has a good roster of weapons, and you can carry all of them at once, so you're basically just this small army destroying everything in sight. However, if that is not your preferred playstyle, you still can play through the game stealthily. You very much can take a stealth approach in Wolfenstein 2, and it's just as fine as it was in the previous game. I'm not going to act like the stealth is amazing in this game, it's rather basic, but it very much is functional. It also does make some encounters much easier. However, in my opinion, it really is a lot more fun to just run in and start shooting at everything. Maybe I'm just a simple-minded creature or a Neanderthal who needs his Wendy's spicy nuggets, but I just love running in and blasting everything, especially when the combat is this good. And then depending on your playstyle, you'll get perks, making you even better at killing, and this isn't given to you in some RPG leveling up fashion either. It's more like complete these basic challenges and you're just going to be better, straight up. And that's totally fine with me. I don't need it to be all that complex here. When it comes to this game's missions, a majority of them are actually pretty good. There's some really memorable set pieces in here, there's some really fun levels, and there's plenty of levels that I've come back to just to shoot more Nazis in the face. There are a few I'm not huge on, like when you're in the wheelchair or when things slow down, but for the most part, I think the levels are actually pretty good here. There is a hub area you go to in between missions, and I've already shared my distaste for a hub area in Wolfenstein games. Thankfully, if you don't really want to be here, you don't. You really, for the most part, can just go mission to mission, but it's there if you want to explore and interact with the characters and watch even more cutscenes. But hey, at least they're good looking cutscenes. This is a very good looking game with some excellent character models, some really great textures and environments, the lighting is solid, the game ran super well, and the soundtrack is pretty sweet. It's Mick Gordon, the man never misses. Now when it comes to this game's length, it's around the New Order's length, that 10 to 12 hour mark. However, I'll just immediately say that the pacing is nowhere near as good as the New Orders, and that the middling story just takes up way too much of your overall playtime. As somebody who's played through the game more than once, if you skip all of the cutscenes, you have maybe 2 to 3 hours of gameplay. That's it. The cutscenes really take up half, if not more, of your overall playtime, and this really just creates a compounding effect where it's like, I want more gameplay. I actually really enjoy the gameplay. I want less cutscenes, less of this middling story, but in actuality, we have more story than gameplay here, and it just has me walking away from this one a little disappointed. There's plenty of things to love with this game. I think it's got a few moments in gameplay sections that are going to live rent-free in my head for a very, very long time. But I always think this game could have been more, and it absolutely had the potential. If you like Wolfenstein, if you like first-person shooters, I still very much recommend it, but I'll just say that it's not my favorite of the modern era. And here we have Wolfenstein: The Old Blood, developed by Machine Games and released in 2015. This is a prequel to Wolfenstein: The New Order, taking place during World War II. It sees BJ going to Castle Wolfenstein in hopes of finding secret documents that will contain the location of Deathhead's fortress, which is actually how The New Order begins. When it comes to this game's story, it's actually pretty minimal. It's easily got the least amount of story and cutscenes of all the modern Wolfenstein games, and you know what? That's fine with me. Not every game has to tell some big epic story. Sometimes all you want to do is shoot some Nazis in the face. The game does have a number of moments to the story, like when zombies do show up, and the tone can be pretty cheeky at times, but I think it's all done pretty well. So this game first and foremost focuses on the gameplay. It's all about the shooting. Now when it comes to the combat, it's virtually the same as the New Order. It utilizes almost all of the weapons from the New Order, and the structure is basically the same as well, where it's just mission to mission. And you know what? It's awesome. The combat is great in this game. It is just as great as it was in the New Order. They introduce a few new weapons here. They also kick some serious ass, and there's even a few new enemies here when the game goes supernatural, and it leads to genuinely some of the best first-person shooter combat of the 2010s. What's there to dislike here? All of the weapons feel great, it's bloody, the game sets up tons of encounters for you to annihilate everything, zombies show up and you get to blow their brains out. The game has numerous awesome set pieces that aren't just supernatural, there's some good ones in the beginning as well, and you can still be stealthy throughout the entire thing if you choose to do that. I have actually never really been stealthy in this game outside of an encounter or two. It's just way more fun to annihilate everything in sight. And when it comes to the gameplay to cutscene ratio, this is the best in the modern series. I don't know if it has the most gameplay in the modern series since it is quite a bit shorter than the New Order, but it's got plenty of action and some really solid pacing. There's also a bunch of throwbacks to the older Wolfenstein games that certainly made me smile. I mean, it takes place at Castle Wolfenstein. Of course, there's going to be some callbacks here, and the whole thing really just feels like a love letter to Return to Castle Wolfenstein. The game looks pretty much the same as the New Order, which looked great, the soundtrack's solid, and it ran super well also. I don't have a ton to say about the Old Blood because it really is just more of the New Order, and that's not a bad thing whatsoever. If you like first-person shooters and you haven't tried this one, I implore you to go try it. You are not going to be disappointed with this one, especially if you like any of the other Wolfenstein games. And so here we have Wolfenstein: The New Order releasing in 2014. Now I very much remember when this game was announced and released. I was super excited for it. I got it on day one and I remember beating it in like 2 days. And what did I do after beating it? Maybe go outside, touch some grass, go get some Wendy's? No, I went back to the game and played through it again because I loved it that much. And here we are 10 plus years later, which sounds absolutely insane, and I think the game is still phenomenal. It really is one of the best first-person shooters of the 2010s. Now when it comes to the story, setting, and world, it's actually fascinating stuff. So the game takes place towards the end of World War II, and the Allies are actually starting to lose. The Nazis have superior technology and are just kind of steamrolling them. BJ is sent into this fortress where all of the weapons are being made, and it's all being helmed by a man named Death's Head. And for the two people who aren't familiar, Death's Shed is one of the main antagonists in the Wolfenstein series. Anyway, he fails to defeat him and he's injured and some shrapnel is lodged into his head, and he actually goes into a catatonic state. He's found and then admitted to a Polish psychiatric ward where he sits there for 12 years. And BJ, well, he's just kind of zoned out the whole time until some Nazis show up shutting down the ward, and BJ actually snaps out of the state, kills the Nazis, and realizes that it's 1960 now. But not only is it 1960, World War II is over and it ended with the Nazis winning, and they actually take over the entire world. And BJ, not happy about this, does what he does best. Goes on a rampage, killing Nazis, starting a revolution, and going after Death's Head. I actually think the story to the New Order is fantastic. It is the best story that this series has ever told. I think the premise is, again, fascinating, it's intriguing, it's engaging, it's a great what-if scenario, and the way everything plays out is great. BJ is fucking awesome. He is a total badass in this game. You want to see him succeed. You want to see him kill the Nazis. He's incredibly likable, and the story isn't drawn out. There's not a bunch of melodrama. The tone is absolutely on point in this game, where it's a pretty freaking serious game, but it still has plenty of unhinged moments, and I genuinely really enjoy it. Is it award-winning stuff? No, it's a Wolfenstein game at the end of the day, but I think it's great. And Death's Shed is such a good villain. You just come to fucking hate this guy. You want his ass grinded down to dust, and you know what? That's a good villain right there. Now, when it comes to the moment-to-moment gameplay, they really changed things from Wolfenstein 2009. Rather than making a more modern, contemporary FPS game, they made something that was actually a lot more old school. You're not regenerating health for the most part. You still have armor pickups. You can carry all of your weapons at once, and the game really is all about making you feel just as powerful as possible, sending waves and waves of enemies at you, and you just get to annihilate all of them. All of the weapons feel amazing in this game. I just love how the weapons feel in the New Order, from the machine guns to the shotguns. Even the pistols feel good. There's a good weapon roster. You can actually dual wield a lot of these weapons, and it's always just such a fun time. I love killing Nazis in this game. It's gory, it's violent, it's visceral, it feels raw. You can customize some of these weapons with different firing modes, and there's plenty of it. But you don't have to be loud the entire time. You can be stealthy, and I have been stealthy in the New Order, and there is some fun to be had here, but not as much fun as going loud and blasting everything in sight, seeing the guts fly all over the place. It's just such a great time. I really could not get enough of this gunplay. Something else that I really loved about the New Order is the game's pacing and the structure. It really is just linear mission to linear mission, just how I like it, and I think the pacing is really strong throughout. There are tons of awesome set pieces. The intro is excellent, and things really only get better from here. Is it as shocking as the new Colossus's set pieces? Maybe not, but overall, I think they're better. Something else that I think is way better is the gameplay to cutscene ratio. There's more gameplay than story and cutscene here, and that sounds good to me. The other thing is, I think the story and the cutscenes are actually pretty good here, better than Wolf 2, that's for sure. But before I get any granular, I'm just gonna say, I think the game is very good overall. It's fun, it's engaging, it's violent, it's got an intriguing story, it looks really nice, it actually looked really great for the time. The soundtrack is by Mick Gordon, and it makes you feel like a total badass. This game, along with Doom 2016, were really the games to bring back this idea that you can become an unstoppable force in a first-person shooter, bringing back the boomer shooter to the forefront. Obviously, Doom 2016 contributed to this more than the New Order, but the New Order certainly got things started, just like how Wolfenstein 3D laid the groundwork for what Doom would eventually be. And here we are with history repeating itself. And you know what should repeat itself? You hitting the like button on all of my videos. Okay, I'll stop.
To shut the fuck up!
Overall, I think this game is excellent and totally worth checking out, especially if you like first-person shooters. And then here we have Return to Castle Wolfenstein, developed by Grey Matter Studios and initially released in 2001. I believe this to be the best of the entire Wolfenstein series. I'm sure there are plenty of people that are going to disagree with me, but this game's always been my number one when it comes to the Wolf series. It just feels like they nailed everything, and this game really is from a bygone era at this point. So the game was a reboot to the Wolfenstein series. Taking place during World War II, the game begins with BJ actually getting captured by the Nazis and sent to Castle Wolfenstein, this medieval prison. Of course, he breaks out pretty much instantly and wants to put as many Nazis in the grave as possible. And that's really the extent of the story. There is a bit more plot to this. Death's Head shows up, he's the main antagonist. There's a lot of supernatural shit in this game, as much as Wolfenstein 2009. Hell, there might even be more. Zombies, vampires, cyborgs, yeah, there's a lot of crazy shit going on in this game, but it doesn't feel out of place. I think it all actually does really come together here though. Is the story anywhere near as good as the New Order's? Is the writing and the plot and the setting as intriguing or engaging? No, but I still do think it is pretty good. Something this game has in absolute spades though is atmosphere and vibe. Like, the atmosphere to Return to Castle Wolfenstein is so good. It has that early 2000s, almost Y2K-like aesthetic and visuals that I cannot get enough of. I love how this game looks, I love how the weapons look, how everything animates, the environments look really nice, and this game really just nails the mood. Like, they knew what they were doing here, and I'm picking up what they're putting down, I'm smelling what they're cooking. I like it. And what certainly helps things is that the music is excellent in this game. Maybe the best of any Wolfenstein game, and that actually is saying something. But alright, let's get to the moment-to-moment gameplay here. It's a really solid old school first person shooter. You can carry all of your weapons at once, you don't regenerate health, you have to find health and armor pickups, and you're pretty much shooting everything in sight. The gunplay actually feels really nice in this game. All of the weapons feel different from each other, and there's a good amount of them. There's more than just your standard World War II weapons here. The game has a bunch of experimental weapons also, and these feel great as well. There really isn't a bad weapon here. I love the combat to this game. Everything from how the weapons feel to how the enemies react, it's all incredibly engaging. Speaking of the enemies, there's actually a really big enemy roster here. There's more than just your average Nazi. Like I already mentioned, a bunch of supernatural stuff shows up here, and you're fighting all sorts of crazy shit. There's zombies, there's ghouls, there's monsters, there's mutants, cyborgs, the SS show up, all these women in leather show up to try to kick your ass, all these kinky bitches trying to take out BJ. There's a pretty healthy enemy roster here, and it doesn't really matter what you're fighting, it's all enjoyable stuff. And it's all challenging as well. I remember the first time I played Return to Castle Wolfenstein, I was surprised with just how difficult this game can get. Oh yeah, it's that old school kind of difficult for an FPS where if you're not at least a little careful, you can get your ass whooped in a moment's notice. So you're still running and gunning, but a bit of skill is very much required here. I welcome it though. When it comes to this game's structure and pacing, I think it's incredibly well done. It's just linear mission after linear mission, and you actually go to a large number of environments. In most of the Wolfenstein games, you go to a few different environments, but this game, they have you going all over the damn place. Yeah, it starts in Castle Wolfenstein, but what if I told you that barely any of the game is actually a Castle Wolfenstein? You go through several other Nazi bases, you go through a dig site, a graveyard, numerous labs where all these experiments are being worked on. There's actually a good amount of variety in the environments and these levels, and I think the level design is actually very well done. All of these levels also have set pieces or interesting and memorable moments to them, and despite there being 27 missions, very few of them feel alike. And like the OG, there's a bunch of secrets and treasure to be found in these levels as well if you go off and explore. And I think all of this really just comes together to create the best Wolfenstein experience of them all. But, like big, round, juicy, fat butt, this game is not perfect. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up some of its shortcomings. I will be the first to admit that the stealth just kind of sucks in this game. There's a few missions towards the beginning of the game in particular where you actually have to be stealthy, and the best way to be stealthy is running up behind someone and stabbing them with the knife, and I've never really liked this very much. It's just incredibly finicky, and the stealth in general is just full of trial and error. But I'm not going to act like this takes up a lot of the game. It really doesn't. And anybody who says that the stealth sections ruin this game really is blowing it out of proportion. Like, look at the grand picture here. Is even 10% of your playtime during these stealth missions? Probably not. That, and I won't lie, it takes a minute to get used to the shooting in this game. It's not as intuitive as it might look. Your weapons are not crazy accurate here. You have to do burst firing for the most part. And while it's not bad and the learning curve isn't a 90-degree angle, it just takes a minute to get used to. I think for the most part though, this game is actually aged incredibly well. It's still very playable nowadays, and it works fine on any modern computer. There were some console ports back in the day, but I don't have any experience with those. I don't want any experience with those. I've always played on PC, and this really is one of my favorite first-person shooters of all time. I believe it's the apex of the Wolfenstein series, and at this point, I don't know if we'll ever get a Wolfenstein game that's better than this. Either way, you know this gets a big thumbs up and recommendation from me. Alright, that's it for this video. We talked about the Wolfenstein games. It was pretty fun. I love just about all of these games. It was fun to go back down memory lane. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you made it to this part of the video, comment whatever I said at the beginning. I honestly forgot. Either way, stay safe y'all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye now.